Hello, my name is Crystal Petrie, and you are watching another episode of the Crystal Petrie Podcast, Season 3. On today's episode, we are going to take a deep dive into how CFOs and C-suite leaders can connect strategy with purpose. In a world where corporate goals shift faster than ever, alignment with the company's mission and vision isn't just good leadership, it's the heartbeat of sustainable success. Let's explore how the best in the business turn numbers, values, and culture into one unified story. And here to educate us is Dr. Gloria Solomon. Welcome to the podcast, Dr. Gloria.
Thank you. Thank you. Glad to be here. Thank you for the offer to uh, speak with you today.
Absolutely. Now, Dr. Gloria, did I pronounce your last name correct?
Is Solomon?
Solomon.
Yes.
Okay, Solomon.
Mhm.
Excellent. So, Dr. Gloria, tell us, where in the world are you?
I am in Maryland. I am in Frederick, Maryland, which is in the western side of the state.
Okay, wonderful. Again, welcome to the podcast. Let's hop into this. How do you help leaders align their personal purpose with the organization's mission?
Oh, that is a great question, and thank you for starting with that one. Um, I am a executive leadership coach,
Hmm.
people developer, and Crystal, I go in and I do groups and individual coaching.
Okay.
And what I do, I work with the organization to try and find out what their needs are and develop what I already have and kind of tailor that to them individually. So with an individual, we come in and we do some assessments and kind of set goals and try and work with them to see where they want to be. So that could be kind of a short term or a long term assignment, depending on their goal and kind of what their needs are. But I do try and tailor that to the individual and the organization.
What do you see as far as patterns, Dr. Gloria, when the executive teams, the CFOs, the CEOs are misaligned? And what do you think is that root cause?
It can be a number of things, but mostly I see that is not like an individual issue, but it's more of a purpose alignment. And the patterns are, have silence, there's confusion, and then there's friction, and a lot of unspoken assumptions. And misalignment often stems from a lack of shared purpose and unchecked competing priorities. And what I do is I use an impact area assessment tool to try and get to the surface of some of those things, where I have them, the client will go through a self assessment and kind of rate themselves in 10 areas. And the friction can come from the individual, the team, and the organization. I
Okay,
saw.
and that was going to be my next question. So the silence, the friction, is that coming from the leaders, the CEOs, the CFOs, or is that coming from the team that's underneath them?
It could come from all of those areas, Crystal. And part of my coaching is trying to get to that point and kind of seeing where the issue is. So as I kind of begin the coaching with them, if we do the assessment, that gives me an idea of where the issue may lie. And that doesn't always come out in the very beginning.
Mhm.
That sometimes will surface as we're working through. Is Coaching is more of a conversation. Me asking questions and listening, doing a lot of listening to what they're saying and picking up on cues. So as my coachee is telling me different things, then I'm making note to try and follow up on those things. So many
During the
times we have concerns and issues, and as we're talking about things, it comes out. It comes out. So I try and be alert to pay attention to pick up on those clues.
during those times, during the coaching where you're sitting down and talking, are
Mhm.
these leaders really taking ownership of the things that maybe they are not doing correctly, maybe not communicating correctly? Or are they being honest about that? Or is that something that you hear that they're not saying, but you're reading between the lines?
A lot of times it's reading between the lines. And as a coach, I do a lot of repeating. And let me help me understand that this is correct, what you're saying. And again, people are going through different tasks and motions and not actually picking up on what's actually happening. And that's where I would come in to help them to kind of drill down and to clarify some of those things. Um, for instance, a technique that I use and that we're taught as coaches is to take perspectives. So you have different perspectives in every situation. So you've got the individual, which would be the leader that I'm coaching, and then you would have the folks that he may be interacting with in that situation, which could be his team, staff, or his executive or manager that he may report to. So we look at it from that perspective. And the final perspective would be from like a 300 feet level where he's looking down to as a outsider to see what that looks like. So we would look at the situation from all three perspectives and kind of examine that. So that could help with kind of looking at not just being self-centered and looking at from your perspective. They did this to me. This happened to me. They're asking me to do this. And we would kind of drill down to look at why and what's happening there from those three different perspectives. And I think that helps in a lot of cases to kind of take an outside look and kind of step back and look in.
This next question, Dr. Gloria, is a two-part question.
Okay.
First part, explain to us what is the purpose factor assessment.
Okay.
Second part, how do you use that during your coaching with these leaders?
Okay. I'm really excited about the purpose factor. I'm all about purpose. I feel like that's something that is really ingrained in us. And I want to give you a quote that I use by Mark Twain. Um, the two most important days in your life are the day you were born and the day you find out why.
Very
Uh,
good.
so the purpose starting certified facilitator for the purpose factor, and it's an assessment.
Okay.
You answer questions about yourself and what you do, what how you think in your beliefs, and it comes back with a report, and it breaks
Okay.
down about you. And that report gives, and I'm gonna look so I make sure I don't get them wrong, Crystal. And it's like four elements and areas that it will give you the report on, and then you go through and we kind of look at that. So the first one is your natural advantage, which is the role you tend to play in life and work. Your acquired skills, which could be that you acquired through education, through work, and just experience. And the other is the pool passion, which is the type of problems that you're drawn to solve. And the other is your origin strength, and it's how you typically solve problems or overcome things. So it kind of
Okay.
breaks it down in those areas. And it also takes a look at what things that frustrate you and kind of the things that kind of excite you. So you kind of can look at those. So it's kind of pulling from your values and beliefs and kind of who you are. And I want to step back and tell you how the purpose is defined with that is the best of what you have to help others. And that's your purpose.
Mhm.
So we do the purpose factor, do the assessment, and then what I would do as your coach is kind of walk you through each of those elements and what that report says about you and help you to understand that and work through some of the things there. Because some things, if you answer the question correctly, and I work with several people, and it's like, it was on point. How do they know me?
Mhm.
And it's quite a thorough assessment, 49 or 50 pages. I was quite surprised when I did my own.
That's a lot.
Yes, yes, it is.
Now,
Yeah.
Dr. Gloria, how does what you do as far as a coach, How does that help translate the company's purpose into leadership and behavior?
Well, coaching is a process, helping individuals to set goals, clarify, and achieve their personal and professional goals and what they want
Mhm.
to work on. And I want to clarify, because a lot of people get the coaching and consulting confused. Coaching is a process in where I help the individual to find their own answer. The consulting is me providing the answer. I may work alongside you and help you to find the answer, but I have to make sure that I'm wearing the right hat because I do
Mhm.
both. There are times, Crystal, when I'm coaching someone and say, I'm going to take off my coaching hat right now because I need to help you, and I'm going to put on my consulting hat. But I make sure that I ask permission to do that because we really believe that everyone has the answer or they can come to the answer with help. So I try and stay in that coaching role as much as possible. But every now and then I have to kind of cross that line. But I make sure I tell folks that I'm doing that and ask permission to do that. So with the coaching is structure.
Mhm.
I provide accountability and help you get a fresh perspective, as the example I told you about earlier. So I'm helping them develop that self awareness and consciousness through different techniques and tools, mostly questions. And a lot of times I'll drill down. And someone said, why are you keep asking the same question? Because I want to make sure we get to the root cause and the root of
Right.
what we're talking about. So I may say, what else? And what else could you do? Is there
Right.
anything else? So making them go through and giving options because it's there and giving them space. So a lot of times I sit and I'm quiet to give people space to think about what that question may be or what they should be doing next steps.
How do you know, Dr. Gloria, when a team or a leader has drifted apart from the team or a leader has drifted
Mhm.
apart from the company? What are some telltale signs of that?
Well, a lot of times you'll hear about it before you see it. You have the chatter within an
Mhm.
organization, and there's going to be a lack of clarity, kind of reactive decision making instead of being proactive, to solve problems. There'll be low energy in meetings and silence.
Oh,
I don't
wow.
know if
Yeah.
you've ever experienced that when you're in a meeting and it's like no one's talking but the facilitator, and they ask the question and there's just silence. You can hear the pin drop. you know, there's an issue there. You know, um, Oftentimes when the vision doesn't drive the behavior, that's kind of when that drift sets in, and they've kind of moved from the strategy. And you can use the qualitative feedback from the teams. What I use in coaching is part of the initial assessment will be an impact area assessment, again, where I can
Mhm.
look at 10 areas and the individual does a rating on themselves. So if they're honest about it, that gives us areas to focus on, and we can work in those areas and look at that for sure.
What does it look like when a leader is actually modeling the organization's values and missions? What does that look like? What does that feel like?
If they're modeling the organization's values, then it should be a good climate to work in.
Mhm.
Um, Folks have the opportunity to be innovative, show curiosity. There's psychological safety there, and they're just and I've been in spaces where you can feel it. It's like it's different.
Mhm.
Everyone's interacting, is they're relating to each other, and leaders are giving direction. It's not so much a command, but they will lead by giving a task and letting the team decide how to accomplish the task versus the leader giving each step by step. The leader
Mhm.
will have confidence in the team. The team will have confidence and feel safety, and that they have or they're empowered by the leader to take action and do what's needed.
It really sounds like the leader has trust in the employees to do their job, and the employees have trust in the leader to do their job.
Exactly. Exactly. That's, I would say that's, I say perfect, but that's a perfect or near perfect environment.
Have you ever seen, because of course there's no such thing as a perfect environment, especially when you're dealing with humans, Dr. Gloria, but have you seen a near perfect environment?
I would say a near perfect environment. I recently retired from the federal government, and one of my tasks in the organization that I worked with was doing like a transformation, a reorganization, and
Mm-hmm.
part of that was the like a transformation team. And what we did, I led the team, and I worked with some consultants that came in to help us with this task. And what we did was to try to change the culture. So, in doing that, we had focus groups that staff at each level was involved in, and
Mm-hmm.
everyone was given permission to be honest, blunt about everything. We had listening sessions where people can come in and talk about anything. I reported back to upper management. No names were given, and just talking about things that people were concerned about. So we really had an opportunity, and we did uh, reshape that culture. We ended with having a one-page document that had words on it. It's like a word collage, and I know that's probably not the name for it, but all the words that we had said that we liked and that we were going to live by as our culture. As new staff came in, they were given this document and said, "This is who we are. This is how we operate."
Oh, wow. I love
And
that.
it was good because, and especially at the beginning, we checked each other. It's like, wait a minute. That's not what we're doing. So we had buy-in, but that was intentional. And
Hmm.
I think if any organization really wants to make that change, you have to have involvement at all levels of the organization. And I said, well, get someone from the outside to kind of come in and help out with it, but to do something like that. And it's really intentional, and people really have to support that. Now we swayed from that every now and again, doing different things, but we pretty much came back to it. And I think most people had that Word document, which was laminated, posted on their wall or on their desk somewhere. So we would always go back to that to say, this is who we said we were and how we wanted to operate.
Dr. Gloria, how do you know when a company is actually talking the talk and walking the walk? Because we have all seen, I'm sure my community that's listening is probably shaking their head. We have all seen or been a part of organizations where they talk one thing, but they don't do the thing.
Hmm. Hmm. I kind of go back to that example to being intentional. And I think it starts at the top with leaders.
Right.
We have to decide that we want to make a change. This is who we are and what we want to do. And you've got to stay anchored. Once you decide on what your culture is going to be and how you're going to operate, that's putting processes and policies in place as well.
Hmm.
You always got to revert back to it. Leaders need to understand that their decisions have consequences, and leaders have to make unpopular decisions sometimes. And I always ask leaders, and I was always the one to raise my hand, and it's like, please explain the reasoning behind your decision. Sometimes they can do that, sometimes they can't. I always ask leaders to share as much as you can so that people understand where you're coming from and the reason for this decision. And people walk around and they think the is it WIFM? What's in it for me?
Oh, I never heard that
They want,
acronym before.
yeah, they want to know that, and it's like they're not asking questions just to ask questions. They're working there. We spend the majority of our lives at
Correct.
jobs. You know, 8 to 10 hours, depending on what your schedule is like. So if you're spending that much time in a place with people, you know, you want to necessarily be happy, but to understand and have some type of peace in being there and know how you fit there.
Mhm.
And with coaching, I can help folks understand that. That's that alignment. So we look at your purpose. Let's look at the organization's purpose, which includes their mission and vision, and let's see how they're connected. Sometimes it's a challenge, but we can get there in working to see what that looks like. And I think leaders need to model that. And you need to understand who's working there. A
Mhm.
manager needs to get to know their staff just a little, and then they can understand why a person likes doing this task or doing it a certain way. And again, that goes back to that leader saying, this is the task, and I don't have to tell you how to do it. Get it done. I want this end result. Now, follow the policy and procedures as best you can. And
Mhm.
if there's any deviation, from that, of course, speak with your manager, supervisor, to talk to them about that. But don't be so restrictive and prescriptive in some things that we do.
I know, Dr. Glory, that you stated that you were the person in the meetings that would raise your hand and say, "Can you explain more? What do you mean by that?" Most people are not those people because they are fearful of what leadership will say to them. They are fearful of revenge. They are fearful of the blowback or the pushback from leadership. What can leadership do to make it easier for people to raise their hand and say, "Can you explain that more? Can you give me more information?"
Yeah, that's a real concern, and I think that goes back to psychological safety,
Mhm.
giving people that space to be able to do just what you said, to raise their hand, to ask that question, and I think that's a topic that leadership has to address.
Yes.
I was one of those who asked those questions, and I know in the past years, psychological safety was a hot topic, and everyone was talking about that. But again, as you say, sometimes we have a lot of talk, and people don't support that with their actions. So, as a coach, I help people to work through that, but I have to learn about the environment and the culture
Mhm.
and help them to navigate that. And I also help people in that perspective to find their voice. And sometimes we have to start with small voice and approach things that way, depending on the environment, and take baby steps till we can get to a point where you can speak a little louder, you know, and not use your outside voice, as they would
Yes.
say, but use your inside voice. Um,
Yes.
but that could be a challenge. So as I'm working with someone, those are questions that I would ask. What is the culture? And how do you feel about that? And where are you with your relationship with your management, not
Mhm.
just your immediate manager, but upper management as well. If I am hired by upper management, that's something that I could take back to them. Um, and I have to be discreet about that because in coaching, um, there's confidentiality. So I have to ask the question about, um, you know, what I can share and what I can't share. But
Mhm.
if I'm hired by management and that is an issue, then I'm obligated to share that with them to say, I think you have an issue with psychological safety. And how are you going to address that? Because so many times it's a combination, Crystal, of the challenge not only being with the leader and individually, but it could be with upper leadership as well as the culture. So it's kind of
Mhm.
difficult to separate the three.
Yes, yes. What have you found, Dr. Gloria, is the most effective way to help with strategic alignment throughout the company from leadership down?
Well, first, to find out where the strategy is it
Mhm.
sitting on the shelf?
Yeah.
So many times That's a box that so many organizations check and they put it on the shelf. So, kind of, first of all, um, are they actively using it? And then looking at how they're using it.
And I
If it's,
think another question, and excuse me for interrupting you,
oh, no,
Dr.
go ahead.
Gloria, do they even have one? Some of
Yes.
them might not even have one.
Mm-hmm. You're right. You're right. And see, that's another challenge in itself. It is.
Yes.
It is. Yes. Um, the first thing, if they do have a strategy,
Hmm.
to know where that individual, that division, unit fits within that strategy. I know I had a very good director, Miss Carol at MEP. When she did the strategy, she broke it down, and she had every division to take the strategy and determine where they fit in the strategy. Where's my piece? The strategy is one big puzzle, and every division and group of the organization is a piece of the puzzle. And I believe once you find out what your piece is and how you fit into that strategy, you can better serve the organization. You know, the organization is, most organizations' sole goal is to make money, make a
Right.
profit,
Hmm.
make revenue. How do you do that? We're going to make widgets. We're going to serve these customers with this service. But along that, you know, most organizations have an accounting department. They have people that are going to deliver the services. There's a product. You've got all the divisions that make the product. So how does everybody fit into the puzzle? And I think you need to translate that down to each individual in division and then to each individual. So they get that, what's in it for me? Why am
Hmm.
I here? Crystal, most people have their purposes linked to their jobs. A
Right.
McKinsey study in 2021 said 70% of employees feel that their sense of purpose in life is defined by their work. When you ask someone to introduce themselves, what's the first thing they say? Their
Where
job
they
title.
work. Where
Their
they
job.
work. Yes,
Exactly.
absolutely. And I feel like that's such an
Mhm.
American mindset. I don't know if they do that in other countries, but I know we definitely do that here in America.
Exactly. They don't say, I'm a mom of five. I'm a this. I'm a, and I'm trying to think of something else. It's like their belief or anything. I'm a Christian. I'm a
Right.
Muslim, a Jew. Or anything. No, we all say our job title,
Hmm.
and that says it all. That's important. So you want to feel like you're valued at work,
Right.
you're contributing at work. And I know it's like people say, "Oh, no, no, no," but I think deep down, I think I think we do. I think we do, and we voice that and show that in different ways, you know. But I do believe that. So knowing that strategy and knowing where you fit in is very important. Is very important. And I think once people have a grasp of that, then they can work much better, be productive, and just make the organization much better, culture wise, as well as just wanting to come to work. It's like, you know, people talk about Sunday evenings. People get stressed because they've got to go to work in a few hours. I've got to go to that job. You know, how do we change that?
That's a great question.
How
How
do we
do
change
we
that?
change that?
Mm-hmm.
But some of what you just said leads to my next question, Dr. Gloria. Working in silos. So you have the accountant department, they work with them, the HR department, they work with them, the marketing, they work with them. How do you get a company to come out of working in silos to working as one complete unit? How do you coach alignment?
Yeah, that's a challenge because everyone is separated by the silos, and I think you've got to sometimes have a cross function and kind of learn what the other groups are doing. We tried that at work where you kind of shadowed folks and you got an understanding of where they fit in. And so many times there's a lack of shared goals, or you're competing with those KPIs, the key performance indicators. They're all the same. So, what I do is try and help leaders to revisit what their goals are, and not just their own, but then looking back at the whole organization, that mission and vision, and to clarify that. So, kind of realigning the communication and looking at the structure of the organization. My division does this, the other division does something else. How do we connect? If you're doing widgets, it's production line, you're putting on your piece and then it goes to the next department, they're putting on their piece. The challenge becomes kind of looking at the accounting department where I worked over at NIST. There's a lot of scientists, but and they're doing their work with science. But in order for them to do their work with the science and technology, you've got to have the administrative folks to make things happen. You've got to have the accounting folks, the financial folks that are making the organization run and function. So a lot of times it was a challenge for us because the organization focused on the science and not the administrators. And it's like, whoa, wait a minute. You can't function without me. Let me tell you what I do and what I do for you. When you need, and I'm gonna say real basic, the beakers and the burners to keep your science experiment going. When you need the compressed gas, somebody's got to order that. That's a contract. So we need the contractors. So you got to look at and take a step back and look at the connection and the linkage between the different silos. But again, that needs to be intentional that you talk about that. We had meetings where each division reported out within the organization. So it was an organizational meeting, and you had every division there. So every division talked about what they were doing. So people heard it. Management supported that. So that helped break down that silo just a little bit. But I think it has to be intentional and you have to have conversation around that.
Okay. What do you do when you have leadership that maybe pushes back against the company's mission or pushes back against the company's vision? How do you fix that?
hmm Um, I have experienced that when I'm coaching with the leader and they have not bought into and agree with the mission or maybe a change that the organization is moving to. And we just have to talk about that and talk through it. And and I don't like to use the word why in coaching because it kind of gives a negative connotation. But in some cases, I have to, and I would ask, why does that matter? The new move, the change, why does it matter? How does it fit with the mission and vision? And people have to understand the mission and vision can change. Companies do a pivot. You look at a COVID, for example. I know manufacturing companies stopped making what they were making and started making masks because there was a need. And there was also going to be a profit for them. What they were producing was no longer selling because people were not going out and doing different things. People were homebound, but they needed masks. So they literally stopped making what they were making and making masks. So that would be a change. And people say, well, we still need to make these widgets over here. But it's like nobody's buying the widgets. So we do need to change this. So again, a conversation and helping people to understand what the mission is, how they fit into the mission, and moving forward. Now, Crystal, I have to tell you, there are going to be cases where, and I've come to this, where I'm coaching someone and they come to the realization that they no longer fit with the organization.
Mm,
They now recognize their values and their
yes.
beliefs, and it's not a match. And we can talk, and we've gone through that. And they've just come to the decision that it's a time for them to make a change for themselves.
Wow,
And that's
yes.
okay. And it's okay for the organization and for them. But you've got to come to that. Sometimes it comes to that. And it's okay. It's just time for a change. And I believe there's truly a season for all things.
So, how do you keep leaders from being overwhelmed and feeling disconnected? Maybe they haven't come to the realization that, this place and I no longer fit. Maybe that's not even the case, but they just start feeling overwhelmed. They start feeling disconnected at the company.
Hmm. Um, that's a case where I think you need to look at boundaries
Hmm.
and look at your role. What is your actual role? We have titles, you have the job description, and I'd say, and we all have that clause and other duties as assigned. um, but look at your role and what you're tasked to do. And sometimes we have to go back in and talk to management to say, I was hired to do this, and we're now stepping outside of that description. Let me know if my job is changing, my role is changing, and get some clarity on that. Other times we need to set boundaries because I have found that if you are efficient, you get things done, you're probably going to get more things tasked to you. So sometimes we have to set those boundaries and go back in and say, my plate is full. I can't take on this task without removing another task. And that's going back to finding your voice and being secure and feeling safe enough to go back and have that conversation with me,
Right.
for sure.
Can
Yes.
you explain to us what is purpose driven leadership and what is traditional leadership?
But the traditional leadership is kind of giving the task, um, and just expecting someone to do it. Just do it and kind of keep moving. Um, with the purposeful leadership or purpose driven leadership, it is more about kind of what I've talked about before, giving kind of the stretch, giving people that ability to be creative, to focus on the organization and the why, what's in it for me, and helping staff to develop and grow. So you're looking at the purpose of the organization and understanding the individual's purpose and helping them to kind of meld the two, that intersection of the two. It's inspiring them, letting them adapt so they can the organization can be sustainable and increase performance. So the traditional is just focus on the task and it's about control and efficiency, where the other gives more flexibility with that.
How do you guide your clients, especially leaders, when maybe the work environment is a traditional leadership environment versus a purpose driven leadership environment?
I would ask them about their culture, um, and ask if they believe that it was doable, that they could kind of function in the areas of more purpose function. Sometimes you can. And although it's task driven, you can still work around some of those tasks with your purpose. Hopefully their job and their role kind of aligns with their purpose. And I do help people to kind of find that. Let me give you an example of that, Crystal. Um, where I worked, it was program management. And I always wanted to be in program management. But the program was about manufacturing. And when I joined, it's like, okay, this is going to be a challenge. Now I've got to learn manufacturing. But I didn't. And I worked in more of compliance and budgeting in the regulation area for the program. And finding, I liked doing the job, but it wasn't really aligned, I thought, with my purpose. And my purpose was helping people develop and finding satisfaction in their job. I did site visits with across the United States and in my territory. So I would go out to what we refer to as MEP centers that were helping small manufacturers within the state. And they would take us on a visit and a tour of some of the manufacturing companies that were there. Once I went out and actually saw how the people that I was supporting by helping them to manage the federal funds and regulation, how they were using those funds to help mom and pop manufacturers, I made the connection. So sometimes it takes a minute to see the connection, and then it may not be right there at the company. It may be in the product or service that you're doing, and you see the end product to the customer, that you see that your purpose is being served. Your purpose may be helping people be healthy, and you're working with at CVS. Well, CVS is all about doing, providing pharmaceutical drugs, um, all the different things in the store that focus around health and um, just products that people need from day to day. So if you're all about people being healthy, then I can see and help you to see that transition from you being a cashier there and how you're helping people, because you're helping them check out, you're helping them find products within the store that they need. So sometimes it may be somewhat of a stretch, but there is purpose there. And again, other times it may be where there is not, and I help people to find that as well, and then to look where you can serve your purpose. Some
You
cases, I'm sorry,
no, go ahead.
in some cases, because I've had work with people who are mid-career
Mhm.
and they're at a point where income level, they want to change jobs and they feel like they can't because I need these funds to take care of my family. If I go start something else and do something else, I'm going to start at the beginning. And I encourage them to take their passion, their purpose, and maybe that's their hobby, and they volunteer somewhere to do that. So you're still getting fulfillment in your purpose, but you're doing the job and still maintaining income to support yourself and your family.
You gave a great example, Dr. Gloria, earlier in the conversation about a lot of companies pivoted from what they were doing during COVID.
Hmm.
That obviously is not easy. And it wasn't easy then. I'm sure as companies continue to pivot and change because of innovation or because of the market, those things still happen.
Hmm.
How do you help leaders face that risk of, let me pivot and do something else because of the market, or, in the example you gave, because of COVID, and that ends up shifting them from what their values and their missions once were?
Hmm. Um, that's difficult, especially someone who's kind of been with the company for a while and this is what we do. Um, but having them to kind of take a look and step outside of where they are, looking at the environment and seeing where the company is, what's going on in your ecosystem, comparing that to what the need is. So I always tell people there's a life cycle for everything. If businesses do not adjust and adapt, then they will go out of business. We saw a lot of that with COVID. A lot of restaurants started, they closed the doors for people coming into the restaurant, but they switched over to takeout. And that was just another a change. And the owners, the restaurants who could not do that, they went out of business. So it's adapting and helping people to understand and seeing. the industry and their ecosystem. How does that function? What does it look like today? And actually taking a step back, what did it look like 5 years ago? Because most companies are not the same. They've adapted and changed to consumer needs, their desires, cost, innovation. One thing that we do know, that change is inevitable and nothing remains the same. I can't think of anything that really kind of remains the same. We have to adapt in order to survive, and that's kind of individually and organizations.
How do you help leadership within companies lead with legacy in mind? And if they're not thinking about legacy, how do you get them to start thinking about legacy?
Yeah, I saw a lot of this a few months ago with a lot of retirements with the federal government, mine including others. So, with the retirement ceremonies, people get up and speak about um, what a person has done over their career and how they've helped the organization build things, been innovative. And it's beyond the metrics. Legacy is the culture that you build and that leaders grow. And it's about the impact that you leave. And again, I saw so much of that with retirements. People have been in the federal government for 20, 30 years, and the legacies that they're leaving is just amazing. It's honestly, it's less about what you achieve, but more about what you leave and what's going to endure after you've left. And again, things still change, but you've left a foundation and a basis for people to move forward with all of that. And it's amazing, and I think people should feel proud that they're contributing and leaving a legacy to the organizations. And leaders should recognize that. And you don't have to leave a legacy, because we all contribute in different ways, and we can all be creative and inventive. And again, having that safe space to do that and to be able to speak up. And I encourage leaders to give staff that space to do that. If you're the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong room. You're in the wrong room. Let people be creative. We should hire people with the right skill set and let them do what they do.
Mhm.
Yes, absolutely.
How do you get leaders to focus? And I know the metrics are important, the dollar is
Mhm.
important, but how do you get leaders to focus not so much on the metrics, but on the successes, maybe the non tangible things that are
Mhm.
happening within the company? And can you give some examples of what those non tangible successes would look like and would be within the company?
Yes. And I know you're right. We focus on those metrics and that one kind of that bottom line. But in order to get to that bottom line, you've got to have other things in place. And you've talked about some of those. Um, and I would say for them asking better questions, to get to know their employees and putting people in the right place and allowing people to move within the organization, promoting from within. Um, so many times, you hire a person for one thing and they have talent and expertise in another area, and you never discover that. And it's those water cooler conversations where they're talking to somebody about something that they know and they're giving them advice, but it remains at the water cooler. We need to take it from there and say, you know what? We need you to come over and work with us for 30 days on this project because you know about this. You've got the expertise and you can help us move this forward. And it's like looking at what does it mean to thrive in an organization? What do we want to be known for? And we have to build reflection points and to kind of redefine our values sometimes. And we want to make sure people can grow. where they are. And you asked me about other things that we can measure. Retention is number one.
Oh, that's a good one.
Retention is number one. And then job satisfaction. A lot of companies will do internal surveys, and part of the surveys will be about job satisfaction, how you rate your supervisor, those kind of things. But it's like, again, what do you do with that information? You know, um, I think you need to really take a look. If you're doing these internal surveys, take a look at those and what can you do. And I know we had an employee relations team, which I think is wonderful. And you pull people from different areas to be on the team, and it's kind of a morale booster, and they're kind of monitoring things and helping to do the soft things and the things that aren't measured. But bottom line, I think the number one would be retention. And they say people don't leave jobs, they leave managers, you know?
Correct.
Um, so how do you keep people? And you need to look at that cost of bringing on a new person versus retaining someone that's been there. Yes.
Few more questions for you, Dr. Glory, then I'm going to let you go.
All right.
How can leaders shift from transactional performance to transformational impact?
Uh, Good question. Because so much is transactional. Um,
Right.
and you can shift from focus from the day-to-day tasks and rewards to kind of the long-term vision and building relationships with folks, inspiring the team with the mission and the vision, encouraging people to grow. So we still have tasks, but again, give people that leeway. Give them the task. You don't have to tell them everything to do and how to do the task. We want an end result. So build trust, invest in time in individuals, and empowering them, allowing them to take their skills and just do the job. And it's kind of switching from the push to more of kind of the pull style. Pushing is kind of telling them this is what you need to do. You don't do it, we're going to write you up. Where the pull kind of inspires and motivates them to be creative, to engage, and just do it. You know, yeah. And you're still going to get the outcomes because you still want the result. But yeah, just to shift a little bit.
Okay, so my last couple questions for you, Dr. Gloria. As a coach in this space, helping leaders align with the company's mission,
Mhm.
what is your goal in this space?
My goal is to help people and leaders, because I focus on leaders, to live and lead from purpose. I want them to be able to support their teams and their organization with that alignment with who they are, kind of what they do, and to have an impact on the organization. Crystal, I use this phrase to live for purpose, on purpose, and with purpose.
Oh, that's good. That's really good. Okay, Dr. Gloria, my final question for you. Who do you think would make a great guest on the podcast? But you have to help me get them on.
I can do that. I think a good guest for you would be Tia Beggs. She's with the McKinley Group. And the McKinley Group, they work with organizations on compliance and governance, and they incorporate some AI services with what they do. But I think what I know Tia for is her topic, and she's always talking about quieting the noise. And I think I might have mentioned it earlier. Keeping the real thing, and get
Mhm.
rid of the noise. And she always reminds me, um, is that task revenue generating?
Ooh, good
Should you
question.
be doing that? So I think she would be the ideal guest for you and your audience.
Thank you, Dr. Gloria. You have been amazing on this podcast. You've just given so many tidbits that I feel like people can listen to today and start implementing today.
Great, great.
So, thank you so much for being on the podcast. And to my community, thank you so much for tuning in and watching. You can get Dr. Gloria's podcast and all of my other podcasts on YouTube Podcasts and Apple Podcasts. And remember, you always have time to listen and learn on the go.